Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service. Not in my office. They are still working on the road. No shocker. Anyway, I am here in the back end of the house so that we do not have to hear the street noise at this point. So thank goodness. So today I want to look at the new moon of April 11th. I know I said on the card reading 12th, but that's because it happens so late in the evening that when you run the asteroid list, because it's done by true time, or the main clocks, as they call it, or world time. Unfortunately, we happen to fall in the next day when you look at the asteroid list. But the reality is that it actually occurs, I believe, at, I'll tell you in 2 minutes. I shouldn't say 2 minutes, that's too long. 9:30 p.m., 9:40 p.m. So it happens in the evening hours, our new moon. And before I begin that, I want to thank all of you for watching the videos. And if you would, please subscribe. That's what we're really going for these days. I'm getting a lot of help with how to make the venue grow. So with that said, if you take a moment, subscribe, and not only subscribe, but hit the bell, because that way you'll get notifications. Okay, so I want to get to this because we have some really interesting stuff on this chart. The first thing I want to point out about this particular new moon, and we're going to look at the charts in just a few seconds, is that it occurs, it's the Aries new moon, obviously, but it occurs at 22:24. And I don't know if you remember from other videos, and those of you who are astrologers, I think that your brain is already going ding, 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 because 22:30 of any cardinal sign is, yes, a part of the Aries point. So that means that we're going to talk about the chart as it is regarding Washington. But I think the bigger thing to note here is that regardless of where you are, anywhere in the world, this is still an Aries point chart. So whatever is occurring will happen more or less in the larger world, okay? Or we will see it reflected there. I guess that's what I should say. So it'll be like a reflection of. Today I want to do a real concentration on the asteroids. I also want to point out that though I look at midpoints in all of the work that I do, I am going to set up this week to redo my midpoint videos. So those of you who are very interested in midpoints and how do we determine them mathematically and how can we find them on a dial, I'm going to do that all this week. So we're going to redo that video and give it the visuals that it deserves. Because one of the things I can do now is really put a lot of visuals on these videos. And I think that for the majority of the population, that is really, really helpful. So I want to look at this new moon. I have, as always, have done this chart for Washington, D.C. The chart itself, and I'm going to show this in a minute, is ruled by Pluto. So we're going to do a bunch of work on Pluto, things that just jumped out at me that I had to go through with you. And we're going to look at all the asteroids that fell in the Aries point axis, because the Aries point axis this month is the Sun-Moon axis. So it's kind of exciting because it groups everything together. It is a new moon, and as you will see, it does feature things like endings and beginnings. So we're going to talk about that in just a second. So once again, thank you for being here. Thank you all for allowing me into your life. And let's jump and take a look at what we have for charts. Now we're here on the Janus program, and as I pointed out, I want to start here very simple. A couple of things, you know, just obvious things, and we'll get to more details about these in a moment. But I want to show the what I call the squares, the trines, and the sextiles. And not only that, but I want to show that this chart stays what they call predominantly below the horizon. with the exception of Mars and the North Node, which are still traveling through Gemini. And as a result, they will fall into the 7th house, but there is nothing from the 8th to the 12th house. Okay, so I just want to point that out. It's always really interesting to look at what the chart looks like. Okay, and I'm not talking about where things are. I'm simply referring to the chart itself, like the fact that everything is in the lower portion of this particular chart. Okay, now we'll look at all that we have in Aries, but I want to point out that though we have so many things in Aries, it's not really a real stellium, because a real stellium has a lot more contact. And one of the things I talked about was the fact that the only real connection here is to Venus. You can go wide and pull that Mercury in, but it's really wide. And Mercury is such a fast planet that I, as an astrologer, probably wouldn't look at that. It's just too far away. 8 degrees is a long way. However, 4 degrees for Venus to the moon and the sun, okay, I'll go with that. I'll go with that one. Now, when you look at all of this at the lower end of the chart, you want to look at things like, well, first of all, look at this beautiful sextile between sun and moon and Mars. And here's where, let me go pulling up my pen here so that we can look at this. I want to talk about just this part. So one of the things that we talk about in astrology are how the quadrants of the chart mean different things, because the houses mean different things. Like, for example, we have the first house, which is the I am house. Then we have the Pluto in the I own house, or the house of values and worth. The I think house has both Saturn and Jupiter in it, or the house of communications. The 4th house is the family. So this is when it starts growing a little bit bigger than me. Okay, so this is the I and me, and that's the first quadrant. The second quadrant is where we come from, and it represents our families, our backgrounds, our form of expression. So you see there's a lot of our on there. And you get here in the 4th house, the house of home, Neptune and Chiron are both there. Chiron's really close to a cusp. Then you have the house of self-expression and then the house of service. And this is the house of partnerships. So it begins more about other people. Okay, so as far as we go in this particular month is this relationship with the one-on-one, okay, or partnerships. Significant others, all the things that go into that territory, partnerships. The other houses involved are really about, so I look at this and I think that, are we all taking deep dives into ourselves during this time? Are there things going on in the world that's coming back to us, that is asking us to look at ourselves, reevaluate ourselves? Or is it from, and I'll give you an example. Okay, and this is just an example. I like to give people examples of energy. It doesn't have to be exactly that, but, you know, something in the realm. That house of expression and this house of Uranus being in the 6th, you know, things being sporadic. I think this is because many people, by the end of April will be vaccinated. Okay, I know that in my household, some people will be done, but everyone will be started. Okay, so that brings a whole other level to the playing field here, because in so many ways, people who are vaccinated are kind of now given the open door. Ah, you're vaccinated. So there's less panic about going. I know that for myself, that I am very leery of other people. So is my daughter. She tells me all the time. And so just not trusting. And because of that, it's been really putting my mind at ease to know that, I'm going to be vaccinated. So the idea here is that it is about transforming our workday. There's your right here, there's your Uranus, there's your change, if you will. So this is the change. But realize that the change in the second house can also, can you see me right? Can also relate, I shouldn't even write the whole word, but it should relate to, let me get rid of that. It should be related to freedom. We can't forget what Uranus stands for. And Uranus is the outer structures, but it's also about freeing ourselves. A real key word with Uranus is freedom, okay? And then we're going to go to, let me go back and grab my pen again. Then we're going to go back and look at Pluto, okay? And Pluto's in the second house. Uranus at 9 degrees, okay, is neither one, they're not really an aspect. And you'll notice there's really nothing going from Uranus that goes to Pluto. It does look like there's a square, but no, it stops here, and that makes sense. It stops here at Saturn because we're in an ongoing Saturn square to Uranus, which unfortunately for those of us of the general public, it equals anxiety. So there's quite a bit of anxiety. One of the things we're going to look at in just a minute is what I like to refer to as the 26 degree mark. And the reason why I'm looking at all of that is because of Pluto. So Pluto rules this chart. You get that? Does everyone see why? Okay. Pluto is the ruler. Now, if we were going by horary, okay, then I can see where, if you're going by horary, then we'd have to look also at Mars, because Mars would be a Pluto, an old ruler of Pluto. And I want to keep it, on the edge of what we're doing, because I think that, because of the trine, most specifically between, it's Jupiter, see this, to Mars, does indicate a healing energy. It also indicates fortunate action. And I can tell you that when I finally got my email, I was really, really happy. So there is, and it's communication. And of course, it came to me through the computer news. So I wanted to show that because I think that we're going to be talking a lot about this 26 degree in just a moment. And look at this, square to Venus. So I'm going to talk about that too in a minute. But this Mars here with Jupiter is a really interesting and a very positive aspect because it is fortunate action. Fortunate action. I'm going to do the keyword stuff. Healing action. Okay, so you can see that if you take the keywords expansion, energies, and that are going toward expansion, and particularly in the form of communication and in dealing with partners and people are able to get together again. Okay, I want to go with that. But Mars in the 7th house is not the best place for it. Why is that? Well, because Mars here is also pointing the finger at open enemies. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Poseidon in a minute. So I'm going to just let that hang, if you will. But do be aware that Mars in the 7th house can be, just interaction, male aggressive energy. In this case, it's in Gemini. It's not all that strong there. And Gemini can also be talking about how a lot of energy is put into information and the gathering of information, okay, which is really going on all around us. And that's why we keep hearing these news story breaks about people in government that have been up to no good. I'm just going to put it like that. I believe that, unfortunately, I think that's, and I'll talk about that in a minute, even why, but I think that that's going to become more regular, if you will, as time goes on. So the Mars in the 7th is also not only, because we have this beautiful node here, but realize, and that node is perfect within minutes, perfect trine to Saturn, okay? Which means, again, being able to be with those people, it's now easier to connect with people. And, I'm real excited because I haven't seen my cousins for a long time, not like we used to. And so things like that, I believe, that's the good sign. That's the good stuff. That's the Jupiter in there. And that's all of that is really, really wonderful. But please be aware, let me just clear this because I want to show this. Please be aware that this Mars, okay, let me go back for a pen, is actually in square, okay, is actually in square to Neptune, okay, close square too. I mean, it's definitely something that we could talk about. It's definitely something that is, so you have this Neptune and it's squaring Mars, and I'm going to be really honest because Neptune squaring Mars is about nefarious actions. Could it be about compassion? And it could, but I would think of that more in line with that Jupiter trine and not with the square to Neptune. Because Neptune is a couple of things. Neptune has a lot to do with this pandemic, okay? Especially because it's an unseen, it travels through air, we could go on and on and on. But I really believe it's also referring to the fact that there have been nefarious activities, actions that are taking place and have been taking place as a result of what's going on. The funny thing about a Neptune Mars is that it is a lot of misdirection. And one of the things that is very misdirected, very possibly misdirected here, is anger. And it makes me wonder about people, doing crazy things like running, up to the, Capitol with your car. The gentleman who did that. It worries me because I feel like we're still having the possibility of these things happening, and very unexpectedly. So I do want to put that in there. And I do want to warn people that you can't be so trusting when Mars is in square to Neptune on any level. And in this particular place, this is like even in your own spousal situation. Because remember that Mars is telling you it's a partner, okay? And maybe somebody is up to something, now they can. And so I'm not saying, could be something foolish like getting involved in an activity or spending too much money, or, that may not be something that makes the rest of the family happy. But by the same token, there is no, I believe, controlling people right now, regardless. And, all we have to do is look at the crazy states and how crazy it's been, and know that you cannot trust everybody, because it is possible that people are infecting, okay, those closest to them. Okay? So, and it could be stemming from, and it, if you look, it's all young people, and I know they're starting to vaccinate them now, but they're jumping guns, and I realize they can't get ill, or they don't get as ill, although the new variants, that may prove wrong. But that's the other thing is, do you understand that because it is the fourth house, this could also be talking about those variants, okay, and how the variants are affecting our healing, okay? So there's a lot to consider just if you want to look at that, all right? Now, I want to point out, as I always do, that this is a chart for Washington, D.C., and that this fourth house and this seventh house, or the fact that everything is playing out down here at the lower end, that's not going to happen everywhere in the world. There may be places where it will be all up here, okay? And that doesn't change these aspects. It only changes the area that it takes place in, okay? So when I look at Washington, D.C., I'm, looking at this East Coast area, and the possibilities are that this is the area where you might find that in your personal life. But if you go, say, to Australia, New Zealand, California, it may change completely what house that you would be involving with regard to these squares and these aspects going on here. South Node, and I don't talk enough about it. I always kind of go to that North Node. But let's just talk about this for a minute, because South Node is an ominous figure here, making a inconjunct out of sign. Oh, no, actually, I'm sorry. I was going to say, because they usually don't put the nodes in. It is always opposite the North Node, which is why it's really hard to read nodes. But this is what I want to talk about. We had a trine to Saturn. Okay, that's there. But there's a beautiful sextile here. Okay, and a sextile means that there's an opportunity. Now, one of the things that I get here is that people could still feel very oppressed by what's happening. And I'll give you another example. Places that are opening up don't have the help, okay? Now, they're going to blame it on unemployment stuff, but I don't really think that's really all it is. What happened when this pandemic occurred, when the virus happened, was people found other jobs, okay? Example. Some people went from the restaurant business to the marijuana business. Some people went from the restaurant business to the cleaning business, okay, because that became a big thing, right? Or they went to become a delivery driver, another business that took off. Or they went to become a shopper for DoorDash or something, okay, another business that took off. So what's happened is there's been a readjustment of the workforce. And it's going to continue. It'll get better. I mean, now that the restaurants are opening, people aren't going to work in a restaurant if the restaurant is only 25% capacity. Because that means that when you're making your $2.85 an hour, you only have the option to make 1/4 of your tips. So one of the ways in which you can fix the restaurant business, but again, this is oppression. These are changes. Look at this. Look at this. Here's another weird configuration. Okay? That also is forming some weird inconjuncts, semi-sesquitrots, I can't even say them correctly, with Uranus. The business has changed. Now, if you want to get the help and you want quality, you have to make sure there's money there to pay these people. So if you don't have the clientele, you need to up the salary. Okay? And I don't think that most Americans are aware that restaurant workers are still working for $2.85 an hour, which they were working at during my time. And I am old. So that I thought that was a pretty interesting perspective on this when I looked at that north node versus the south node, but particularly that north node and then how it figures with Uranus, and then how it figures with even Mercury, or how it figures with Saturn, because it is an aspect to all those things. All of those things are in aspect. So you're getting news. And by the way, that's a trine and another sextile. So the nodes, both ends, are figuring very well. But the problem is that I'm always concerned when the south node is configured well, because the south node is an oppression quality. It's like people going backwards with their karma, so to speak, and not going forward. Okay? Something to think about. Pluto tells us that things are transforming, they're changing, but it's squaring Venus. So there's still a lot of issues with finances. But I also think this is value systems. One of the things that's coming out and this is, something to do with money, but very little really, is the idea of what do we value as people? That's going to become huge in the next year or two because of the Pluto return of this country. Do we value everybody equally? Do we value the LGBTQ community? Okay. I just like to say that they're my gay brothers and sisters, and it just makes me feel better. Or trans brothers and sisters, The same thing with, do we value black, brown, yellow, purple people? Do we value other people as much as we value our own resources? What does it mean to ascend? To rise above. Okay? So there's a whole, we have to, in life, and it's coming to that, we have to really learn to think for ourselves, and through that understand what our own personal value systems really are, and whether or not it's really okay to kill people when they're being arrested. I'm just going to use that for an example, because that trial is going on right now. And, unfortunately, I saw the whole tape. I do not recommend it. It was probably horrible. I can't even imagine that anybody who was there doesn't have post-traumatic stress disorder. So, again, what do you value? Question that, okay? Not only question it, but maybe we need to start communicating. And maybe working on our communication and our understanding. Because even when we say that we're not racist, we are. Okay? We automatically assume things, which is a racist concept. So just a lot to think about, a lot to work on and understand. Okay, because ascension is what we're doing right now in this new age. We're ascending, we're rising above, we're looking at things differently. Maybe we're looking at some things for the first time. All of that's going to change our value system. And I don't really care what house Pluto's in. Okay, in this case, Pluto is ruling this chart. And because of that, I am going to bring this up, and I'm going to bring it up when we get to the next chart, which we can look at right now. I want to look at this simply because of politics, okay? And because of what's playing out politically in our country. And what's really interesting is, because I am a very political person and I follow politics, I have my whole life, even when I felt the rest of the world was asleep, I recognize that in the rest of the world, what's going on in our country is also very important. That we're being looked at by so many other countries right now. And I can tell you from experience that every time we have an election for president, we have to explain to Europe about the Electoral College. I'd love for us to get rid of it. So just as an example, okay? So there is a big interest in what happens in the United States, okay? So I want to, we're going to look at a few things. I'm going to leave the Aries point for a minute. I'm going to start with this ruler of this chart. Now, please be aware that if you live in California, if you live in Australia, if you live in New Zealand, if you live in Africa, your chart isn't going to look like this. Okay, but the interesting thing is, for some reason, a huge amount of people who live in all those other countries are really interested in what's going on in the United States because we are going through a transformation. Whether we accept that or not doesn't matter. It's still going to happen. It's sort of like astrology. Whether you believe it or not, it still occurs. The reason why we study astrology is because we kind of want to stay on top of what those cycles are going to tell us. But the reality is that astrology works whether you believe it or not. And the same thing is true even with what's going on with our government. Whether we want to believe it or not, what's going on is really affecting the rest of the world. Okay, so Pluto sitting here, well, first of all, let's talk about the fact that sitting here with this ascendant is this asteroid, Shiva. It is retrograde, and please note that retrograde energies do not work the same way as direct energies, ever. So if you're an astrologer, there has to always be a consideration for those things that are retrograde, because they're more internal, they're more reflective. Doesn't mean they don't count, doesn't mean they're not happening. Oh, they're happening. But they're not happening on the same level, okay? And so what we have here is we have a Shiva sitting on literally a degree away, 1 degree, absolute exact, from that ascendant, which in the form of astrology that I study is an aspect, okay? Of course, because it's an angle, we can go 10, but I'm not going to do that at all today because this chart is only valid here on the East Coast. But at 2.5 degrees, or anything within 2.5 degrees, I will go over. And also because that 26 is really important to what I'm going to be discussing. So the fact that Shiva shows up at 2553 is really, really important. Okay? And the reason why is because it is about basically reconstruction. It's about destruction to rebuild. It's about withdrawal, moving away from things in order to rebuild, reconstruct is the word that's often used with this. So now, as I look at this 20, because it's 25, 26 degrees, I'm going to stay with that for a moment, all right? I want to show you something that I found fascinating. So what I'm going to do is we're going to look at this, and we're going to look at this, because it's Pluto. Pluto rules the chart. But do you understand that I'm not just talking about Pluto ruling that chart? I'm talking about the fact that they're both at 26 degrees. So we are going to do a little study of 26 degrees, a little each way, but approximately. So this is where I go back to Venus is there. So remember Venus at 26? Here she is. Okay? 26 degrees. But other things that I wanted to talk about. Okay, well we have, because if you're doing a golden triangle, I didn't do the golden triangle. So this 27 degrees of Circe I did not use. Okay? I kind of wanted to stay with true aspects. Like, for example, this Persephone. Okay, Persephone is going out on your own, being on your own. There are some things in life we can only do on our own. It is not retrograde. Pluto is not retrograde. And one of the things that I can't help but think that this is referring to is the fact that through doing things or being on our own, okay, we've been able to change things about ourselves. Spending that time in retrospect, even though they're not, okay? But it is also about how transforming is sometimes really essential. It's really essential to be on your own. In other words, I say this all the time because I'm a counselor I do a lot of private work for astrology, tarot. I work with couples. I do a lot of work I've been doing a lot of work like that since, wow, the 90s, but actually even before that. So, but the 90s legitimately. So you take, early 90s even, wow. You take this energy, okay, and this, you're going off on your own. Pluto is it's transformation. It's, okay, so our value systems have changed. And it's interesting because the houses that I'm using are the 9th and the 2nd. Now realize that if you're in another country, in another part of this country, that may not be true. I would really study it, but I'm going to be really honest with you. I'm just talking about the energy. I'm talking about transformational energy of Pluto in opposition to the energy of Persephone, which tells you that there are some journeys that you can only do on your own. Isn't that interesting? And I didn't need houses to talk about that. Okay? So that was one. That was the oppositions, okay? Now, I want to stay with the opposition for a minute because I'm only going to go with oppositions and squares today. I'm not going to talk about the golden triangle, which is a completely different element. I know I do that sometimes. But this time I had so much information staying in the square that I thought that would be the way to go today, which also makes the energy a little bit stronger. So running with that Pluto, okay, and you can't really see it on here very well, is an asteroid by the name of Melopene, okay? So it's Melopene. And what that means, I'm sorry, it's opposite Pluto, so it's up here. As a matter of fact, it's really close to Persephone. And it's running with Persephone, which is to say that being on our own, it's been transformational, but it's also getting worse. It's making other things worse and worse and worse. That's at 26 degrees of Cancer. Okay, I have my asteroid list right here. So we've got that, okay? Yeah, Proserpina, I'm sorry, I keep calling it Persephone. It's Proserpina. I know, surprise! You can mix them up. They do mean the same thing, but let me get the right one here. It's Proserpina. Okay, so Proserpina at 26 degrees, 14 minutes, is sitting right there. And then I did see Mel, it's M-E-L, and it was right down, I must have it wrong. I know that Asteria and Hebe, and here we go. This is 2 degrees away. I can go with it, but you know, the one thing that I did like about it was if you put it in the conversation, it's about being of service and service people. And I just got done telling you that the service industry is having a hard time finding the people they need because they opened up so quickly. Okay? And people were so antsy to get out, as you may well realize. But this is also about enabling. And then it goes back to, how is this enabling transformation? Being on our own is enabling transformation. And also, how is it that service or being of service can be an enabling factor toward transformation as well? And again, I'm not speaking houses. I'm only speaking about the asteroids. I did see, I have Mel. Okay, Mel is, I see. Mel is up here. So I'm going to take Mel out of this equation. It's for something else. We'll get there in a minute. But Melpomene is not opposite its Proserpina. So I did not, there's my notes, get that going. The Shiva or Shiva is in effect by virtue of a sextile, which means that it gives opportunity to reconstruct. Okay, the withdrawal has given people, what did I say? I said they got new jobs, okay? Some people like the new jobs better than the old jobs. At least in this house, they do. Okay? So it's happened to several people here directly. So that's a factor. All right? Now, I want to talk about the squares. And because I'm using a different computer, because I can't be in my office due to road construction, I'm going to have to put this stuff in myself, okay? Venus is running with, let's see if I can find any of them, because this, like I say, this software, okay, here's one. Here's my, see it? Right there it is. There's the okay, so one is Proserpina and one's Persephone. Persephone, as I got, is down here, right there. Okay, so she's one. She's in my book. She's she's listed, and she's there, and she's sitting there with a couple of asteroids that are all in the same within that. I want to say I didn't go further than a degree, or further, not much further than a degree here. Adamite, which tells you that money's tight. Okay, money is tight. Venus tells you money is tight. And so even though there's more money because of the stimulus checks, we're still many people struggling with that, especially if they're on their own. You know, that's one neat thing. And, you know, in adult children moving back with their parents and all that during this time, that's actually a good thing, because the people who are on their own sometimes are suffering the hardest. Okay? Falling also, and this is all squaring Pluto, which rules this chart. But it's also squaring Pluto for real. So if you are in California, it's still squaring Pluto. Okay? The other asteroids that fall there are Adamite, which is having resistance, having firmness, sticking it out, getting through it. But it also tells you how there are delays and there are obstacles and how it is tight, okay? And with that comes Pythia, which is, this isn't what I thought it would be. I thought it would be different, especially people who got stimuluses or people who are opening up their restaurants. They thought they would have all this labor. No, they don't, okay? Because the labor pool isn't sitting out this round. I know they think that, but that's not what's really happening. The majority of people found new jobs. It's been a year, people. It was time to move on, okay? And many of us have done that. The other thing that it squares, and this is from the other end, and no way do I get any of these in here, okay? Though I'll be able to show them and actually I won't, because I'm not on the right computer. It always goes back to that. Anyway, it does square Clotho, okay? And one of the things I want to talk about with Clotho is that it is retrograde. Clotho is new beginnings. So it's like where new beginnings are happening. Don't get me wrong. When something's in square, it doesn't mean it's not happening. It means that it's difficult. It means that there is so much energy being put into making it happen. Okay? And the interesting thing is it did fall in the 11th house, which is of associations, organizations. Okay? And I'm going to point out something else that's going to be happening. And I know people are aware of this. Many people who started working at home are not going back to the office. They're just not. And that is going to change the structure of that association, okay? Because if some of your big wigs don't have to be in the office, they're not gonna. If there's no need to be there, except for random team meetings, then they're not going to be there. And my bet is that ultimately many businesses will downsize. Not their workforce, but their facilities. So that is going to affect them in that way. So new beginnings, okay, and let me just show you what Clotho looks like, okay, and see how good my art is here. And then you put a K there. There's Clotho. So, and I wish I could show you this better, but unfortunately I can't get the same amount of asteroids in this program that I have on my computer, and I'm not sure why, and it's just a question for a software expert, not for me. So I'm going to move now into the dial. So I went through all of the squares. Oh, and by the way, I did miss something. Up here, down here, when I said, let's not take Melopine, because Melopine ended up being here. I don't know why it was even on my paper. I think I have a suspicion why, and I'll get to that in a second when I get to the asteroids. But the one that I did forget is, remember down here where I talked about enabling, and I talked about how I didn't really want to put that one in, but what falls in between, and I'm going to get to that stuff with the midpoints, because there's a midpoint here. If I don't want to use 2402, and I'm not going to, because a little far from 2644, but what about 25? Yeah, in other words, here's a midpoint. The midpoint is Asteria. And Asteria is an asteroid of prayer and meditation. So a lot of times when I see it, I really believe that it could be people who are praying, praying for the transformation, praying, for things to work out, depending on who you are, and what kind of predicament you have yourself in, even in terms of if we're going to go back to the second house, or we don't have to. We have Pluto here. Pluto is transformation. Maybe you're not doing well through the transformation. One of the things that will come to your attention, everybody's attention, is that some of us deal with change a whole lot better than others. I always say, don't make me move. I don't deal with that well at all, even though I might be the one who encourages it. We're having renovations coming soon to this house. I don't know where I'll be when that happens. I mean that literally. I may have to go somewhere else completely different to do these videos. But between them out front and them working in the next room, literally. But, you have to think about how people enable one another. And so if I'm not good with change, somebody could enable me by not forcing that for me. And that's not helpful. That's called enabling. And I think that when it comes to transformation, we have to look at that. And please look at it with regards to what's happening with that Mars in the 7th house. When I talked about anger earlier, and I really talked about, how it could be displaced anger. Remember, I talked about that just a few minutes ago. Just make a note here that it's 2306, but this is 2526, so that's about 2.5 degrees. We could say that that's playing into it. This is a huge factor right now because this is overreactions. Are the anger issues of others or of somebody we know, are they overreactions? Even in my own household, just literally, because remember, this new moon's already in effect. Even though today is just the 6th, it doesn't matter. These things come into effect. They come slowly in. And I can tell you, in this household, there was an incident where people overreacted, including myself. Okay, so look for that, especially when it comes to anger. The anger was a frustration moment. It didn't need to be directed at anybody. But because of the square, and we talked about this, because of the way the Mars energy is situated, we can go back to Janus to see it better. Oh, can't do it on that one now. If we go back to the Janus to show it better, remember we talked about this, that there's good trines, beautiful things to this Aquarius, but not so great to Neptune. Remember that? And remember, I spent a lot of time talking about that square. Well, now I find out, and I realize that I never wrote it down, that Ophelia is actually running with Mars. That's a really important thing to talk about. Because when people start overreacting, you can say, whoa, I'm overreacting. Or, wow, she's overreacting. Sweetie, you're overreacting. You know, it really helps put perspective on it. So, you know, take that into consideration. So I'm going to move back here, and we're going to move on to the dial for the last part of what I want to work on. Let's just really quickly look at this. I did this earlier, and I just wanted to really point out, because this is like the first stuff I look at when I'm starting to set myself up, that the moon and the sun are both conjunct Mercury. I don't think they are. It's so far away, 727, that's pretty far. But this, here's where knowing your astrology pays. I would not look at that mathematically and say, oh yeah, they're an aspect. No, I wouldn't. However, look at this. Okay, let me grab a pen here. Look at this, all right? Right here, 39 seconds in declination. And that is a parallel, which acts like a conjunction. So that actually does create a conjunction with Mercury, the sun, and the moon. Okay? I really think, you know, this is the reason why it's really important to look at your charts. Okay? Here's all the there's the conjunction of Venus I was talking about. Here are the sextiles. But here's some of the stuff I didn't talk about. Okay? I didn't talk about the contraparallel to Neptune. I didn't talk about that. It's an opposition in terms of 52 seconds. You know, whenever you're talking declinations, they're strong. They don't do wide orbs. So you have this, and here's Vesta. This is our work, our goals, okay? So there's a sesquitron. And I think people are working. I know I'm working on my summer plans already. I'm not planning on traveling this year. We're doing renovations. But I am going to be seeing my family, which is really exciting. I can talk about the parallel to Pallas, where the strategy is about these new beginnings. Yes, okay. I can talk about the trine to partners. I can talk about the parallel to Chiron, the change, the turning points. Realize that Chiron is turning points. Okay? It's alternative things. It has, people don't follow or don't go by the rules. I'm going to talk about that because I think that one of the issues coming up that we'll all be talking about, and realize that whatever you see up here, you'll generally find here. The exception is the sun is in parallel to the midheaven by 44 seconds, and that is not up here. Okay, the sun and the midheaven in this chart are tied together because the sun is in the Aries point axis. The midheaven of this chart, okay, is the future. And it means that the world is watching the future of what's going on in Washington, D.C. Okay? That's all that Green New Deal and stuff. The rest of the world is really watching that because it does affect everybody when you're going green. Okay, the world. That's where we are only one planet. You might be many countries, but we are only one planet. Okay? We also want to talk about, like I said, the square to Pluto, huge, just huge in this whole thing. That, you know, this is The squares to the sun and the moon, the new beginnings, have to contend with that transformation. They have to, because things have changed. People have gone on. Okay? What else did I want to talk about here? Okay, I wanted to really show these declinations, because I think the declinations really speak about the chart. Okay? And, you know, here's our gun control thing. Okay? Opposite Zeus. I don't think they're going to take the guns away. I don't think they'll ever do that. But I do believe they are looking at regulation and gun control. I mean, my goodness, you have to have a license to drive a car, but you can any Tom, Dick, or Harry can go to the store and buy a gun. I mean, it just doesn't really make sense. And I'm also very against military weaponry being used by general public, because we're not trained for that. It's not the same as having a handgun, working with an automatic, okay? So I have a lot of issues with that. So I'm kind of glad to see that the sun is in opposition to Zeus. Here's another. And it's very close, because it does mean to me that on some level Washington is looking at that issue. And it's tough. By that opposition, it will be tough. And I know but it has to be done. I just don't think there's any other way around it. The irony is that there could be more shootings on the horizon. And as there always are, I think there's like a shooting every week anymore. So that's not going to bode well for us. Okay. I didn't go, when I did this prior, I did not bother, and let's just do it for the heck of it, with Jupiter and Saturn. But Jupiter and Saturn, real important. There we go. Okay. So here's Jupiter, okay, and here's Saturn, just so that you know where I am, okay? And Jupiter has a lot of aspects, but Jupiter is warning us, okay, there is a parallel to business, and I do believe that's good, but there's all of this stuff with, authority figures, that squaring the ascendant, trining Zeus, there's your guns again. So I think they are looking at it, but the stuff that really kind of is squeaky is when you get down here to Saturn, and you know that nothing is going to be done easily with Saturn in parallel to Astrea. That, our restrictions, they're still going to be talking about them off and on, because a lot of people that don't want to get vaccinated. And I wish I could say they're going to be okay, but I don't think that's true. I think that because of variants and because of other things, this isn't going to be a herd immunity thing. I just don't think it's going to work. And some of the people that I listen to have also agreed with me on that. They wish that it would be herd immunity, and that whether these people get vaccinated or not, it'd be okay, but I don't think so. Now, one of the things that we should make note of before we go into these asteroids is look at Pluto. Pluto's importance in this chart is phenomenal. I just got done going through a chart, it ruled the chart, but I talked to you about all of these aspects that Pluto has in this chart, okay? And I mean, tons of them. And what that means to us. So I did want to point out that Pluto is the most aspected planet in this whole chart. And we've only begun to live out our Pluto here in this country, which is just amazing, because a Pluto return will not happen until 27 degrees, and we are only at 24 degrees. So we're at the point of feeling it, but we ain't the point where we're going to be hitting it, and it's going to hit us 3 times. So that's a whole other video, and I am definitely going to be on that. But for now, please make note that Pluto has been making a very big impression on this particular Aries new moon chart. So I think that's really important. I think that Pluto as a planet, is also playing out the very end of the Capricorn age, and that it's kind of a reminder that we are moving into a new age, and the old age is leaving, literally. And I think we can see it in everything. But I think that here we go again with some people have a really hard time accepting that things are going to really change. And I hope they change in a more equitable way. So I'm very much in favor of the change. I've waited my whole life for this. I knew it was coming. So it's very exciting for me and people like me. But not everybody is going to feel this way. So let's just put it this way. The millionaires and billionaires who are not good people, please note that I put that in there, because I know millionaires that are good people. They do what they can. They help other people. I know there's a lot of Oprahs out there, okay? I'm not referring to them. I am referring to a lot of people who were in the last administration who are all about money. Unfortunately, not as good about being stewards of the money, just about being takers of the money. And I have a feeling a lot of those people are going to have a reckoning. Okay? So it's part of the changing of the guard, the changing of the age. So moving on. And we're looking at this as a dial. And I'm just going to go in and put it where it's supposed to be. But I'm going to talk to you about, okay, here's the sun and moon, okay? And they are smack in there. Here is our midheaven. So I didn't elaborate on the asteroids because I'm going to do it now. Because this does not matter where you live. It doesn't matter. If you live across the country or across the world, the sun equals Vesta Atlantis. And I'm going to talk a lot about that because Atlantis is the asteroid, and I should also mark it off on here because I am, as I talk about them, I want to get them off my list. But Atlantis is gloom and doom, so it's this whole idea of gloom and doom. And the Vesta, which is conjunct it, is this distance, okay? But it's also work goals. Vesta is your work, your goals. People tend to think that people who are very Vestan tend to be distant and cold. So I'm going to put that in there. And with that sun, let's look at this. We have this asteroid right here, Terpsichore, which is body language, body image. And this could be speaking to the fact that during our time away, people were not healthy, somewhere. Other people could be worried that if they go back to work, it's going to affect their privacy. Okay, but there's also this gloom and doom sense, like, oh no, we're going to go back out there and it's still not right. You know, we still have a virus. So there's this gloom and doom aspect. If you look at the chart of Washington, the gloom and doom is a political venture, especially on the Republican side, of things changing. But once again, I think there's a lot of Republicans that want to hold on to something that isn't there. The other part of the Republicans these aren't the real Republicans. I happen to study from, like I've mentioned on many of these videos, and you know, Heather Cox Richardson would tell you, as a Republican, since that's what she is and she identifies as, these are not real Republicans. No, these are anti-democratic, most of them. But anyway, the chart here features this line where you're taking things like body image and, you know, privacy, a sense of gloom and doom, and Vesta, are all like in the mix for this month, which means that as I go through this list of asteroids, and there's a numerous amount, there are things that are going to show up in your life that you're going to go, oh yeah, that fits that. Okay, so there's a lot of that kind of thing going to be going on. So a couple of things. First of all, the sun and the moon are running with a health asteroid, Astrea. I'm sorry. It's not Astrea. Astrea is running with something else. I'll tell you in a second. It is Ascapulus. Okay, Ascapulus, if I'm saying it correctly. Ascapulus. Ascapulus is running with it, which means that this could be related to health matters or health issues. Now, health issues does not have to just be the virus, okay? But other health issues could have, during that time, gotten worse because of the virus. Things that were not, that you didn't look at because the virus was going on. Things you let slide, okay? So it could be all related to that. So then it moves on, and the next asteroid that I looked at was Hephaestus. And Hephaestus is the fact that some things don't fit. Couples that seem inappropriate, don't work, don't fit. Interesting in light of the sex scandal of, what's his name, Getz, let's say it the right way. And the fact that it was a privacy issue. And, so we could really throw that in there. But this is a Washington chart. But I want us to think, as always, in a more personal way when you look at the chart, because I think that we learn best, not so much studying mundane charts, although that helps, but by studying our own natal and progress charts, okay? So, or return charts, whatever it will be. But I can tell you that people with node Admetus are still being very stable, and I think the majority of people are still staying in what I like to refer to as smaller crowds, okay? You wouldn't know it with the young people, but I still think that the majority of people, because, you might see gatherings of even 1,000, but the majority, there's millions of people, might still play it tight because of this positioning of the sun. And remember, I'm talking about the world here. I'm not talking about spring break here in the United States and Florida. I'm talking about the world. Okay, so in the world, be alerted to what I like to refer to as mismatched couples, or people that don't seem to fit together, even business partnerships that seem ill-suited to one another, okay? Other things, there could be stories related to metals. Hephaestus was also a craftsman, so there's a couple of things there. And then it could be talking about craftsmen in their work because of Atlantis Vesta across the dial, okay? Fair. Boy, I think fair is huge right now. Fair is also in this axis. And just again to reiterate, the axis is the cross, okay? So the fact is that the sun this time runs, as a matter of fact, I'm going to do it to exactly where it is, but you'll still see that it's exactly there, okay? It's right there. That's exact. So this cross that's forming, these are just midpoints. And I'm going to talk about those on Friday. Not this chart, I'm going to use something different, but just to understand that what they're pointing out for you there are these midpoints that you're seeing here, okay? Programs do them for you, but I do want to do a video on how you can do it for yourself. Especially for those of us that work with a bazillion asteroids, you could work with the asteroids, you can put them on the dial, but it's still not going to be picked up by the dial, you see. You notice how none of the asteroids are picked up because they're what's called an outer wheel, okay? So other asteroids, we want to be fair. Everything that we do right now, we want to think in terms of fairness. Remember, I'm all about equity, okay? I'm going to talk about all of this in a minute, so I'm just going to kind of let that slide. As a matter of fact, I really feel this is instrumental in what's going to be going on. The other things that are in here, House is in here. Interestingly, I'm sure Many people have been spending a lot of time in their house, so new furniture, new TVs, new renovations, buildings that need to be overhauled. Even people looking at downsizing their businesses because they don't need the space if they can work remotely. A lot of things like that. It's a time of endings. Well, I think that's what Pluto is trying to talk to us about. We're ending an age. We've already ended it. We're just like doing the residual cleanups right now. Okay? So there's endings are featured. And through the endings, there will be many wins. Win is also in here. Nothing comes easy. Okay? Because look at this. The Aries point is still across. Okay? So these conversations, they're not necessarily going to happen just move and groove right into it. But yeah, it's there, so it's going to happen. Hack. Well, that's computers, but it also could be shortcuts. So we're trying to shortcut things. Now be careful that when it comes to the health issues that you're not shortcutting, because that would not be good. Okay? Stockholm shows up here, and I'm really curious how this will show up, because it's, again, we're talking Aries point. Stockholm is Stockholm syndrome. So it's when people treat other people badly. Okay? You know, Stockholm is also the fact that people go back for more. So it's not just about how people treat other people badly, but how those people who are being treated badly are either stuck in those situations or don't know any better. So some of that may come to our attention as well. Panacea tells us that we're trying to solve problems. That I do believe. I do believe we're trying to solve problems. And, you know, Magdalena is about attractive, particularly women. But again, I think it's the mask concept, because Cupido is about faces. And instead of seeing Cupido in this mix, as I normally do, I am now seeing, I'm trying to think of where Cupido even is, because it didn't, here it is. It's with pressure. It's with, it's running with Volcanus, which is at pressure. So mask wearing is still very much in there, okay? Yeah, it's falling with Volcanus and especially Apollon, which means if you want to do business, you will wear a mask. So it definitely is in there. It is talking also about interruptions and disruptions. Yeah, because if you just open so quickly, then you're not going to be ready and prepared. And there are going to be all kinds of interruptions and disruptions. But I also think interruptions and disruptions are things like breaking news, which we keep hearing about. Okay? Apollonia tells you that business is in the forefront of what's going on here, but it is retrograde. So it could be reflections about business, just like I was trying to do when I'm saying people are not unemployed. You know, they're not just sitting on unemployment and not working. Like people will believe you that no, they got other jobs. So now they have to try out another pool of employees. That's how that works. And I got news for you. Not everyone can work in the service industry. Been there, done that, and now I am way too old. So you can't say that anybody can work in that business, because you can't. Okay? It's a young person's field for sure. So Apollonia is that retrospect, but it also reminds us, as does Panacea, more than one solution. I do believe that. We're going to find more than one solution, more than one hack, more than one shortcut, more than one instance of where people are treating other people badly. That might be the border. Okay, because again, I'm reading this chart. And believe me when I tell you, I read an article today. The headline was that the general public, I believe this is true, is much more concerned about how those people are being treated at the border than they are whether or not that border is open or closed. So the misconception is that we're going to keep all those people. That's not true. I think what's true is that a normal person knows that what's occurring at the border is not the result of people going out there saying, hey, come on in, it's better here. No, no one wants to leave their home. Think about that. Who wants to uproot their family and move? People don't even like doing it when they have to do it for a job in another part of a state. Okay, so with that said, it is the humanitarian factor. And remember, this is a world affair here, this chart. The humanitarian factor is much more important than keeping borders open or closed. And I always like that the historian points out that that border has always been open. Okay, because, oh, that's right, those are the people that do the labor work that other people don't want to do. So, something to think about. Urania is here, and Urania is astrology, yay! But it's also thinking logically, and it's through thinking logically that we have victory, okay? Mentors show up, which makes sense, but also does Morden, which means that even as we go through this, I think there will be surges. I really do. I do. And one of the things that it talks about is that we need to put more emphasis into structures and into being more, in other words, don't just open up things, but be more structured about it. Be more structured about handling the groups of people so that it isn't run amok type situation. I think it's also about everybody's excited to open up. Yeah, but let's do it in the right way. Okay? So I have gone through everything, and this is probably extremely long, so I apologize. So let me come back. So I'm back. And I just wanted to say goodbye. I'm not going to keep you too long. I've kept you long enough. Boy, I've never done anything over an hour, and this one is. So I apologize. Makes me think maybe I should redo it. But in any event, I'm going to leave you here. Until we meet again, happy readings. And thank you for sticking through this one.